Good evening, and welcome to our forum for Missouri Senate Districts 7 and 9. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Jackson, Clay, and Platte counties. I am Anitra Steele, and I am a member of this league. The League of Women Voters is a trusted grassroots, nonpartisan organization whose members do the hands-on work to safeguard democracy. While we neither endorse or oppose candidates or political parties, we are directly involved with sharing the important issues. Our mission is to empower voters and to defend our democracy. We envision a democracy where every citizen has the knowledge, the right, the desire, and the confidence to participate. Our membership is open to everyone. I'd like you to know our other Zoom members, league members volunteering with me. Misty Jigger is the timekeeper, and our Zoom is monitored by Crystal Kemp. I lead our forum's admin team. The public has sent in the questions via the league's website, lwvkc.org. And tonight we welcome our moderator, Cheryl Barnes, a member of the League of Voters. Thank you.
Thank you. We're delighted you are joining us for the Senate District 7 and 9 candidate forums for the primary election, August 6th. Tonight, we'll hear from candidates running in the Democratic primary. For Senate District 7, Pat Contreras and Patty Lewis. For District 9, Darren Black, Brandon Ellington, and Barbara Ann Washington. Forums last approximately 90 minutes. I'll ask each candidate the same question, selected from those submitted by the public. The order of each candidate response has been determined by random rotation. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds to respond to each question and 2 minutes for a closing statement. All of the candidates running for this office have been invited. We're happy to see everyone here participating in tonight's forum. The forum will be recorded and available on the League's webpage, lwvkc.org. Candidates, please answer the question asked and stick to the topic. There will be no rebuttals, but you may go back to an issue during your 2-minute closing remarks. So we'll begin right now. The first question will go to Barbara Ann Washington. And it is, please introduce yourself, tell us your education and background, and why you are running for the state legislature.
Hi, and thank you for having all of us tonight. My name is Barbara Ann Washington. I'm currently the senator for District 9, and today I am the only senator from Jackson County that is a Democrat. We have one other senator that represents Jackson County, and that is Michael Searboy. All the others have resigned to take other positions. My education is I have a bachelor's degree in journalism from the famed University of Missouri School of Journalism in Columbia. I have a law degree from the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Law, and I have an MBA with a healthcare concentration from Avila University. I'm running for Senate 9 because I'm already here at Senate 9, and in the last 4 years that I've been there, I've been the most effective, the most engaged, and will have the most experience as I'm the only one that is running for any of these districts that has already served in the Missouri Senate. I have been able to bring back more than $250 million of funds just for Jackson County, predominantly my district, District 9. I've created new grant opportunities that one would not think of, especially with food insecurity and urban farming. And basically, I've been able to establish the relationships that are necessary to bring our community forward, such as a deal with the Cattlemen's Association so that they provide a cow every month to nonprofit organizations that feed our children. I've been able to make sure that my relationships affect and impact all of us.
Thank you. Pat, same question. Introduce yourself, tell us your education and background, and why you are running for the state legislature.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. I'm deeply honored to be here and very grateful for this platform. My name is Pat Contreras. I'm running for the 7th District, Senatorial Missouri Senate District, and my education background, I grew up here in Kansas City. Went to both public and private schools. I studied business and education at St. Louis University. And I have a master's in public administration from Columbia University in New York, where I studied how big systems work, how cities work, how states work, how to make our government more efficient and deliver results for their constituents. I'm running because I'm the only U.S. diplomat in this race. And now more than ever, we've seen so much dysfunction out of Jefferson City. We need someone who can go in there and hit the ground running and diplomatically get things done and fight for Kansas City's fair share and more. I also have a track record of just getting things done. One of the things I've heard after knocking thousands of doors is people just want results. People want you to take care of them. They want government to work for the people. And that's what I bring that's decidedly different. Over the last 8 years, I've worked to deliver results for Kansas City. I've delivered almost $1 billion worth of construction work and economic impact. Also created thousands of good paying jobs. We think about the important issues of affordability and housing and things that are critical to just a successful Kansas City and one that is inclusive and accessible for all. That's the commitment that I make. That's the new energy that I bring and the new leadership that I think that this Senate needs is someone like me who can go in there and help work across the aisle and get things done and fight for Kansas City's fair share and more.
Thank you. Brandon, please introduce yourself, tell us your education and background and why you are running for the state legislature.
Brandon Ellington, background, former 3rd District at-large city councilman. Before that, state representative, 22nd District, Black Caucus chair, Democratic whip, academic education, UMKC and Purcell. But my real education comes from real world engagement. And that would also be what separates me in the political arena. When we talk about effectiveness, when we talk about being able to build bridges across the aisle and even passing legislation, I've been blessed to do that on both levels. I've been able to do it at the state level. I've been able to do it at the city level. When we talk about relationships, I believe, even though the senator is currently serving in the Senate, I believe there would not be a gap. There probably would be enhancement in certain relationships, which would make it probable when we talk about expanding partnerships, increasing state allocations, and ensuring that Kansas City is not overlooked when it comes to equality at the state level.
Thank you. Patty?
Good evening. Thank you, League, for organizing this forum tonight. I'm certainly happy to be here and I'm a proud member of the League of Women Voters. My name is State Representative Patty Lewis, and I'm running for State Senate District 7. I was born and raised here in Kansas City and come from a working family. My parents, or my dad and grandparents, were members of unions, and their locals gave us a chance at the American dream. I'm a nurse by background. I received my bachelor's of science in nursing. I spent most of my nursing in critical care, ICU, where I took care of the most vulnerable patients in the hospital. Truly the voiceless. I advocated for patients who were on ventilators. I took care of patients who were admitted to the hospital because they couldn't afford their prescription medications. I also took care of patients who were victims of gun violence. And I'm running for state senate for the same reason I started my first race. I'm not a career politician, but an advocate. And I feel compelled to advocate for everyday Missourians and move Missouri forward.
Thank you. Duran?
Yeah, thank you for hosting this forum. And I'm Duran Black. I went to Westport High School, but I got a GED from Northwest Regional Youth Center. And I will go on to study economics. I got a bachelor in liberal arts and also political science at UMKC. And so one of the reasons that I'm running is that I believe that government is too large. Government is too big. Government can't solve my problems, and I don't think that the government can solve any of our problems. I'm the only Republican in the race, and so I used to be a Democrat, so I understand what the overreach of government can do. And so I believe that people in Missouri, they need lower taxes. I think we need to focus on ways that we can help our business community to grow, to actually be the one that provides jobs. I don't think government provides jobs. I don't have a political background as being to elected office or anything like that. And so I believe that being a conservative voice in this election and being a conservative voice in Jefferson City will go a lot longer and go a lot farther for the constituents of Kansas City and Jackson County. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat, the next question goes to you. We'll start with you. What skills do you have to steer the legislature back to a functioning body after all the dysfunction of the past 2 years?
Absolutely. I think that's a very important question. And what I hear from a lot of folks when I'm talking to voters is people just want results and they want somebody who can lead. As we've seen the turmoil, even from a national landscape standpoint, people want to be heard. People are feeling unheard. They're feeling left out. And what I bring that I think is decidedly different is my training as a U.S. Foreign Service officer, and one that was also spanning 2 administrations, the George W. Bush administration, as well as the President Obama administration. And in these instances, I was able to work across party lines and get things done and deliver things as important as national security for our American borders. I served 2 tours in Pakistan overseas, and also served a tour in Mexico. In many of those instances, I had to work across the aisle and also in different languages and in different countries in very difficult political and social environments. And I take that skill set that is unique, that has never been in the state legislature as a U.S. diplomat to get things done. And that's what we need now more than ever, is someone to be able to go in there and work across the aisle. And I already have existing relationships. I ran for state treasurer in 2016. I grew up here in Kansas City again and have great relationships all across the state. But I know what it's going to take. It's going to take decisiveness. It's going to take leadership. I've served at the highest levels of government and at the highest levels of business, understanding how money moves, how people move, how it impacts working families, how it impacts nurses and firefighters and first responders. And that's what I bring is as a U.S. diplomat, is to go in there and get things done for our state.
Thank you. Patty, same question. What skills do you have to steer the legislature back to a functioning body?
Yeah, so despite the dysfunction, it's a shame that this past session, the least amount of policy bills were passed in the history of our state. And there is so much need in the state. The majority party is too busy fighting amongst themselves and primarying each other, and Missourians are being left behind. But despite the dysfunction, I have a proven track record to work across the aisle. As a member of the minority party, I have passed several bills, including mental health parity, to address the mental health crisis that impacts every corner of this state. I've passed extending postpartum care to address the maternal mortality rate that is equivalent to a third world country here in the state of Missouri. And, while I'm able to work across the aisle to get things done for Missourians, I certainly do not hold back when calling out the Republicans on their hateful agenda. And as state senator, I'll be able to hit the ground running on day number 1, because I've got relationships on both sides of the aisle and in both chambers. Several of the senators I served with when they were House members and on both sides of the aisle. So I'm ready to get to work on day number 1.
Thank you. Barbara Ann, your take on what skills you have to steer the legislature back to a functioning body after all the dysfunction of the past 2 years?
I will start off with saying some of the dysfunction has been to the advantage of those of us who live in Jackson County. I stood for 50.5 hours, the longest ever filibuster in the history of the state of Missouri, to make sure that one voice, one vote continues to go on. Relationships are crucial and important. I'm the only one in the Senate who has been to every one of the 34 Senate districts. I have supported all of my Senate colleagues, regardless of their political power. So how do we stop the dysfunction? One, we stop voting for people who are going to cause dysfunction. And I don't believe that anyone on this forum right now who is running as a Democrat will cause any of that dysfunction. You have to be able to work with folks, and you have to be able to see through the noise. Sometimes the dysfunction that you all are seeing in public, we are in the background making sure that we are the reddest state in the nation that does not have CRT. We do not have book bans, and we've been able to do that I personally worked on making sure that we were not able to do those things. But the other thing is you have to find the similarities between yourselves. We all like to eat. So I focus on food insecurity. Brought back $1 million last year, $600,000 this year, created a food security grant. As long as we find what our similarities are, then we can cut through the noise of what we have. And some of those people that were noisy aren't there anymore.
Thank you. Duran?
I think one of the main skills that I have that I bring to the legislator is being able to listen to folks. I find it interesting that Democrats and Republicans are both dysfunctional. I mean, we have seen dysfunction coming from both sides. And I don't necessarily think that we can say that all of the Republicans actually represent Republican values in the legislature. And being a Democrat myself, or being once a Democrat myself, I understand how the dysfunction of the Democratic Party has actually played a part into the lives of the folks in Kansas City, Missouri. If you look at District 7 and you look at District 9, it's like night and day. And so going to the legislator and using those skills to be able to listen to the constituents and use those listening skills to actually apply those skills into forms of legislation and the forms of action that can support the business community, I think that that's what we need from District 9.
Thank you. And Brandon?
Skill set, authenticity, the ability to understand, and being determined. And these intermix in all type of levels. And I give a short story just to prove it. The last time I was at the Capitol, I passed a bill that removed the statute of limitation for sexual abuse and molestation. We see that that bill is still around in the civil form. The compromise at that time was to remove the civil so we could pass the criminal. The understanding and the authenticity happened in committee. We're working with Kevin Carlo, who happened to be the committee chair, who wrapped it up in the omnibus bill, getting it over to the Senate, with former Senator Smith, who is currently in the U.S. Senate. And I said that to say this: when we talk about partyship, when we talk about dysfunctionality, or even the fundamental differences of investments that we see in District 7 and we see in District 9, a lot of that comes from the lack of understanding of how these laws intersect, how the economic prosperity can intersect, and also authentication when it comes to representation. Because when you have that, you have somebody that tries to spearhead to ensure that investment and laws is coexisting in a fashion that uplifts the district. So again, my ability to communicate and to be authentic, I believe, would help us greatly in the Senate when it comes to laws, when it comes to disenfranchisement, when it comes to ensuring that our tax dollars aren't being frivolously wasted by local municipalities in a very obvious disinvestment scheme.
Time, Brendan. And this next question will start with you. And that is, one of the bills which was considered but not passed in the last session had to do with protection for poll workers. What is your position on state-supported protection for these public servants?
It's on me?
Yes.
That's a very easy one. I believe poll workers should definitely be protected. But I would go a step further and ensure that our elderly are being protected when it comes to abusive schemes with voting. So not only should we protect poll workers, but we should ensure that we have a network in which our elections are adequately being supervised, in which our seniors are not being pillaged off of their lack of political understanding, and that our elected servants, and I'm going outside of poll workers, but our elected servants, and that our elected servants are safe too as they're doing their elected duty. This is the shortest answer for me.
Okay, thank you. Barbara Ann, poll workers, state-supported protection for these public servants?
I'm one of the people that actually filed that bill previously, so I truly believe that we need to protect our poll workers. In fact, our Jackson County elected officials at the election board asked for those bills to be looked at and to be passed. We need to protect anyone that comes to vote. It's a constitutional right. And in that, we need to be able to protect those people whose job it is to make sure that we're allowed to vote. In Jackson County, especially in District 9, most of those poll workers that work for the county election board are elderly people. So we need to make sure that we protect them so that they continue to have that opportunity to be a voice and be part of the process. We also need to protect the poll workers that are volunteering for various organizations and for various candidates. No one should have to be afraid to go to vote because they may or may not agree with someone else. So I am truly in awe of that. And I work with some of the county clerks. Some are actually elected state reps that I served with, and I continue to work with them on the Senate side. And I've also talked to election board personnel throughout the state to make sure that to listen to them to see what they need. They asked for this bill. I filed the bill, I think my first 2 years in the Senate, and will continue to support any bill that protects those who are working to protect our elections.
Thank you. Duran?
I think it goes without question that you should protect the people that are working in elections and the people that are working at the polls. And my thing is that our vote should also be protected. One of the things that, we just seen in the last legislative session was a 50+ hour filibuster that is literally taking away people's votes. Everyone has come to find out, or if you don't know, and if you're one of those elites from the coast, everyone has pretty much figured out that if you spend money in Kansas City and St. Louis, you can pretty much do whatever it is that you want to the Missouri Constitution. So the initiative petition reform bill was something that was critical that would give people that live in rural areas the idea that their vote and their voice is being heard as well. So of course we should protect people at the polls and people that are working the polls, but I think that we should actually take it a little bit further and actually protect the votes of the people who feel like they're not getting heard. And so I would do everything possible to make sure that initiative and petition actually gets through the legislation so people in the rural areas can make sure that their voice is getting heard as well.
Thank you. And Patty? Protection of poll workers, what is your position on state-supported protection for public servants?
Yes, I absolutely support state protection for poll workers. As it was mentioned, they are public servants. Voter intimidation is unacceptable. At this time, more than ever, we need to cool the political temperature down. We need to increase voting access, things like same-day registration. Unfortunately, the supermajority Republican Party is too busy focused on voter suppression and removing the one person, one vote. I would like to thank Senator Washington for her efforts in protecting one voice, one vote. That was critical to save the IP so that we can so voters can vote on abortion rights in November. And I am ready, when needed, to hold the Senate floor with Senator Washington to protect voters' rights in Kansas Cityans.
Thank you. Patty, this next question will go to you first. What are your trusted sources for information on issues concerning science, history, and social issues? Trusted sources for information.
Sorry, Cheryl, could I, if I may, a quick moment? I haven't had a chance to answer that last question on supporting poll workers.
I'm sorry, please do.
No worries, no worries. I'll keep it brief, but a lot of folks here, especially as it relates to what Senator Washington has done, I will do the same. I will protect, this is about protecting democracy. This is about protecting our vote. And it's about protecting the initiative petition process. And for me, as someone who has grown up here in Kansas City and someone who has had the opportunity to have just an opportunity and shot at life, for me, it's also about supporting those most vulnerable who many times get shut out of the process, who many times they just don't have a voice. And I think that we've seen a lot of extremist bills coming out of the legislature, certainly from the Republicans. And what I want to do is protect democracy, protect our vote, protect our people, and protect our poll workers, which I think, and I believe, and I see them as essential workers. They are ones that are on the front lines, and they're out there every single day in difficult environments. And certainly, as we see the turbulent environment nationally, we want to make sure that we're protecting our people here locally. And I will do all that I can in the state Senate to make sure that we are offering those resources and those protections at every angle so that we're protecting our poll workers at all costs. And that's a high priority for me. It's essential workers, and I want to make sure that I'm protecting them and continue to protect our democracy.
Great, thank you. Now, Patty, we go to you. What are your trusted sources for information on issues concerning science, history, and social issues?
Right, so I certainly appreciate that question as someone who received a bachelor's of science in nursing. I believe in science. Sometimes some of the colleagues that I work with don't. One of my great resources I like to use is called Most Policy Research. They're fellows that are designated to help legislators provide nonpartisan information based on facts in studies. And you can reach out to them for a variety of different topics. I utilize them in my committee prep work, as well as in preparation for a floor debate. I also, utilize the constituents, everyday Missourians. I encourage them to come down to committee and testify. We need to hear from them. Also, experts in the field, nurses, physicians, advocacy groups. And because of my collaboration with these folks in committee and for the past 4 years serving as state rep, I'm the only candidate who's been endorsed by Planned Parenthood, firefighters, nurses, and teachers.
Thank you. Duran, trusted sources for information on issues concerning science, history, and social issues.
Well, I'm a liberal arts type of guy, a classical liberal arts type of guy. And I usually get my information from a variety of sources. Science has gotten very strange as of late. It's one of the reasons why I'm running right now, because it seems that over the years, you would think something as natural and something that would be considered to be just basically embedded in the reality that we live in would be pretty much consistent. But all of a sudden, we start to see that men are no longer men, women are no longer women, and these things that can be fungible when it actually is not fungible. These are hard science types of things. All of a sudden they come up for debate. And so one of the things that I make sure that I do is I make sure that I just stay well informed, well educated, and make sure that I'm well read. And so I don't think that I would even be sitting here right now if we were still sticking to the true, science that we have always known. So science and information as of late seems like it has become kind of fungible. And so I try to always measure the things that I come across with the things that are classical, the things that we know to be true, and try to leave those things that are developed into basically a social understanding or a pseudoscience to the side.
Thank you. Brandon, your trusted sources for information on issues concerning science, history, and social issues?
Very easy one. None. History has proven that we're not taught honestly about genetics. We're not taught honestly about medicine. We're not taught honestly about social structure, nor are we taught honestly about past technology. And that's not my opinion. That's hard evidence that we see. So I believe in studying and looking at as much information that I can. I trust very little orthodox academia information. And give another story. I went to UMKC, studied political science. My professor was a political science teacher. Everything that I learned in political science was non-applicable when I got elected. Non-applicable. So I believe, again, in studying, being serious, but I trust no dedicated source that teaches us about history, science, religion, or genetics, because they don't teach that openly or freely in schools.
I see. Okay, thank you. Barbara Ann, your source of trusted information?
The first thing I learned as an attorney was there was a level of documents in areas that you should trust. So the first thing I'm gonna do is make sure I trust the statutes. Second, I'm gonna make sure I know what the laws are. So I'm gonna read those cases. I have to do that for my job outside of the Senate. I'm gonna make sure that I know what's going on in other places. As a lawyer, I check every day for what laws have changed. But I also go to conferences so that I can talk to others, experts in those fields. Like, why is our maternal mortality in the top 10 in the state, in the nation? And why are we the only state whose maternal mortality numbers went up, and Black women in Missouri are dying 3 times more than white women? So I want to go to those conferences like and am blessed to go to the White House to learn how do we address that and bring those back and make those results work in reality. I listen to those who actually know what they're talking about, who have proven what they're talking about, and who are not just floating conspiracy theories or touting things just to be elected. I make sure that I read and keep up with policy journals and policy organizations, most being one of them, National Conference of State Legislators, the Children's Abuse and Networking. I listen to the experts. And as a news person, I'm going to always be a news person. I'm going to pay attention to the news, because when I watch what's going on, then I know what resources to go to make sure that I can do the best thing for the state of Missouri.
Thank you. Pat, your
Yes,
source, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's a great question. I think my trusted sources are holistic in nature. When I think about, news outlets, when I think about just also, as mentioned before, what I've heard here, just, going to conferences and being able to understand what's going on in the world today, but understanding also from a neighborhood community level, how that impacts people's lives, whether it's affordability issues that we're seeing, or whether it's just the Jackson County tax assessments that are impacting people's lives. For me, it's a holistic view. It's being able to be tuned into what's going on in the news. It's studying, it's reading a lot. It's reading some of the newspapers, it's reading some of the magazines. It's also reading trusted sources, where data is central, where they've actually reached out to people. It's both qualitative and quantitative in nature. I did a master's in public administration where I studied statistics. A lot of that is also understanding how data sets work, but it's also not only talking with individuals and it's qualitative research, but it's understanding how the law impacts people and how surrounding environments matter to people. And that also just makes me think about just the importance of results. And again, this election is about results that matter for our people. When we think about the issues that are dealing with our working families, or with our children when it comes to education and funding our schools, it's so important that we get that data right, because it's about driving results and measuring those results and engaging community one-on-one to make sure that we're in fact making those impactful decisions that are impacting people's lives every single day. And we're helping with affordability, and we're making Kansas City again affordable for all.
Thank you. Duran, we'll start with you with this next question. I've got a preface here. On the August 6th ballot, there are two constitutional amendments, both sponsored by the legislature. The next two questions concern these ballot measures. Amendment 1, which states, shall the Missouri Constitution be amended to allow places where individual, corporations, organizations, and associations provide child care outside of the child's home to be exempt from property tax? This is intended to make childcare more available, which would support the well-being of children, families, the workforce, and society as a whole. State government entities estimate the state's blind pension fund could have annual lost revenue of up to $400,000. Local governments expect an unknown fiscal impact. What is your position on Amendment 1?
I haven't studied Amendment 1 yet, so I really can't tell you my position on Amendment 1. But one of the things that I believe is that when you have, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of popped
Thank
up.
you.
When you need more of a thing, then you have to find ways to get more supply to the market. And when you are lowering the barriers for more people to engage in those activities or to provide that service or that's needed, then I don't think that that's a bad thing. So growing the economy of Kansas City and growing the jobs and growing the industries that we need, I believe that the more barriers that you lower to do that, the better quality of life that you're going to get. I haven't studied Amendment 1, but in my opinion, if you want more of anything, then you should lower the threshold and allow people to be able to engage in those activities in those industries to bring those services that people need.
Thank you. Brandon, should the Missouri Constitution be amended to allow places where individual, corporations, organizations, and associations provide child care outside the child's home be exempt from property tax?
This is an interesting one, and it kind of reminds me of the data question that you just asked, because I heard stuff about conferences. A lot of initiatives come from think tanks, and they don't actually come from legislative bodies, which makes it dangerous. With this one, it's extremely interesting because on face value, you would think that this would be something that would enhance childcare. But when I look at a lot of the regulations and a lot of the laws on small proprietors, of childcare. I don't see them having a net benefit as I see big corporations and companies having it. What makes it dangerous to me is when I think of initiatives that Kansas City got involved in around the airport with developers, and there was promising childcare, and that childcare never came. So I'm happy there's something that's on the ballot that the citizens can actually vote on. Me personally, I don't like the way that it can be misused when it comes to corporations and large entities having a free pass. When it comes to small proprietors, I'll be all for it, but that's not exactly how this initiative reads.
Thank you. Pat, your take on Amendment 1? Should the
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Cheryl. I have not studied one, so I can't comment too much on that. But what I do think about is one of my important priorities, really, that is to lower the cost of living. When I think about childcare support, we need to do all that we can from a state perspective to help working families and those who struggle to make ends meet, to help frankly, childcare has just gotten out of control and it's just too expensive. Families cannot afford childcare. And if we want a productive workforce, we need to be able to augment that and help support them so they can get back into the workforce. You know, one of the biggest initiatives that I have right now is when I think about lowering the cost of living is expanding affordable housing options, as well as looking at unique ways that we could institute a progressive tax system that could help ease the burden of folks that are living in various regions, and it's really reflecting everyday cost of living, depending on whether you're in St. Louis or the Boot Heel or Kansas City. But for me, what I really want to focus on when I think about lowering the cost of living is about a holistic view to workforce development and training. You know, we have almost 236,000 skilled trade jobs in Kansas City, and over 40% of those have to be replaced over the next 5 years. And when I think about workforce training, it's also offering opportunities so that folks can afford these good paying jobs, but also educating folks and increasing public school funding so that we are preparing our young people for the future and giving them the tools and skills that they need to navigate society and be productive workers for our future of Kansas City. One of the things that we just really have to focus on is lowering the cost of living. And I have a track record of delivering those types of results over the last 8 years, and doing that all across our district. And I plan to do that in the state Senate.
Thank you. Patty, should we amend the Constitution and make an exemption from property tax for childcare institutions?
So first of all, I definitely recognize that we need to do more with increasing access to affordable childcare. It is a huge barrier. It impacts our workforce. You know, I have voted time and time again for the childcare tax credit. This amendment, I think like some others, it's a little tricky with the language, you know, with amending the Constitution, but we need to, you know, I'm not sure where I stand on this particular issue, but I have history and a record of voting to increase child access to child care. We need to do more for working families, good paying jobs, working conditions, and I'm proud to have you know, a record to supporting that.
Excuse me. Thank you. Barbara Ann, your take on Amendment 1?
There are pros and cons to Amendment 1. As a grandmother who has to assist my daughter with childcare as she travels for her job, I know the difficulties. And as a single mother, I know the difficulties that it is to find childcare that is affordable. This amendment will be for all entities that will be able to provide childcare. We know in the legislature how important childcare is, which is why we worked our butts off to try to pass a childcare tax credit in the legislature that we just couldn't get across the board. What are the cons? This is a property tax adjustment, and our public schools are funded primarily through property taxes. So I've been very supportive and helped develop the funding that gave more daycare training funding for those daycares that are providing pre-K and Head Start. So we need that to offset the loss of the funding that will happen when we don't have that the property taxes coming for our schools. So we do need something to help But I do believe that the property taxes and income taxes can come back, because the more a parent can go to work, the more that they can afford childcare, the more they can go to work and they can pay income taxes and pay property taxes and be more economically advanced.
Thank you.
Excuse
Thank
my
you,
voice.
Time. And this next question, we'll start with you, Barbara Ann, and that is Amendment 4, which states, shall the Missouri Constitution be amended to authorize laws passed before December 31st, 2026, that increase minimum funding for a police force established by a state board of police commissioners to ensure such police force has additional resources to serve its communities. This would authorize a law passed in 2022 increasing required funding by the city of Kansas City for police department requests from 20% of general revenue to 25%, an increase of $38.7 million, though the city previously provided that level of funding voluntarily. No other state or local government entities estimate costs or savings.
One, no other local entities estimate costs, because Kansas City Police Department is the only one under state control. And by state control, I mean that has a board of police commissioners appointed by the governor. I argued vehemently against this on the floor, even though some of my own legislation was included in the omnibus bill that put this before the public. I would be remiss to not say increasing it by $39 million only to pay $8 million to $12 million a year out for excessive force claims would be a slap in the face to the residents of District 9 and the East Side, which is where we have the most excessive force from the police department. We have consistently spent approximately 23 to 24% of the general budget on police. However, they have not spent that. We allocate that funding to them. They are still short-staffed. All the resources that have been provided to the Kansas City Police Department, things that will help them be more amenable to people of color, people that are low income, homeless, they have not been allocating that. So I don't believe that you should mandate that it has to be 25%. Instead, it should be the entire state is 20%. We should stay at the 20% and work from that number as needed.
Thank you. Pat?
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate it. I have not had a chance to study amendment number 4, but I do vehemently support local control of our police. You know, when I think about growing up here in Kansas City and some of the issues that we face, certainly in just public safety and generally just around the trust or the lack thereof sometimes even between just communities or even between communities and law enforcement, you know, what can we do to bridge that gap? And how do we continue to move forward with a police or a board that helps govern that, who really understands what's going on here locally? It's so important that we have folks here that live in this community, that work here, that have kids here and grandparents, and send their kids to schools, that they have that facility, that agency to be able to determine how that functions here in terms of public safety. So for me, it's a top priority of mine to be able to help bridge that gap. And in the state Senate, I know that there's going to be a lot of conversations around this and how this evolves, and having my background with someone who can work across the aisle and get things done is so essential as we think about that importance, and also making sure that we're leading from a place of community and neighborhoods, and those folks are certainly engaged and involved and included, and there's a voice that's being heard as it relates to the control of our police department. So that's my take on things, and looking forward to strengthening those solutions as we think about community, as we think about our well-being and public safety.
Thank you. Patty, same question.
Yeah, so first of all, I support our first responders and law enforcement, and you know, they're heroes in keeping our community safe. But we need to focus on crime prevention and the root cause of crime. We need to invest more in early childhood education, fully fund our schools, fund after-school programs, address homelessness. I did not support this when it came through the House because I do not support unfunded mandates. If the state of Missouri is going to tell Kansas City what they can or cannot do with their budget, they should fund it. I don't think the state has any business telling our city or any municipality for that matter what they can or cannot do with their budget. And when it goes to the vote of the people, why do people in the Boot Hill get a vote on our budget when they don't even live here? So I didn't support this when it came on the House floor, and I cannot support an unfunded mandate.
Thank you. Brandon, your take on the police budget?
Short answer, no, don't support it. Long answer, this is where understanding and dedication actually comes in. One has to actually understand what happens at the local level with the police funding, and there's a lot of confusion. And this is not necessarily confusion on people just because they choose not to know. It's truly a hidden mechanism how PD, Kansas City PD operates with their finances and what has to be made apparent to the city council. I believe the state should be out of it completely with the exception of oversight. I believe the state should be curious and even desperate to do a forensic audit of Kansas City and also the police department to see why there is such a gap in homicide clearance rates. Why is there such a gap in abundance of funding when we look at other municipalities and the lack there of the ability to, what do I want to say? The ability to hamper crime. So again, I believe the state should do a forensic audit if the state wants to be involved in any capacity when it comes to law enforcement in Kansas City. And I think that will go a long way in clearing up a lot of misunderstanding of why we don't have boots on the ground and why PD is allowed to generate so much revenue and keep it in the dark. They don't have to show it to Kansas City City Council. And this is extremely problematic when you talk about funding police officers.
Thank you. Time. Duran, funding the Kansas City Police Department?
Well, I mean, if you look at a government, like a household, even though I know a government is not a household, but to spend 25% of your resources on security just seems a little bit excessive. But I understand because the quality of life as it concerns with crime and things of that nature here in Kansas City and in St. Louis, everyone is upset. I mean, we just saw what happened on February 14th with the Chiefs Parade, and we have recognized the trend of homicides in Kansas City, and so I understand when people want to try to create ways to solve the issues of public safety and bring a better quality of life to folks in Kansas City. That's understandable, but trying to say that you have to spend or making it mandatory to spend 25%, I think that's a little bit excessive. But I definitely agree with Mr. Ellington. The level of corruption that has existed in Kansas City and Kansas City politics has brought us to this place. So trying to figure out ways to provide better public safety is things that we should be focused on instead of 25%, budget spends.
Thank you. I want to do a brief follow-up with a yes or no answer, if you don't mind, in the interest of time. Do you support returning control of the Kansas City Police Department to Kansas City? And we'll start with you, Barbara Ann.
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Patty?
Yes.
Brandon?
Some form, not a yes or no question.
Duran?
At the moment, no.
Okay, Brandon, we're going to start with you with this next question, and that is, Governor Parson recently visited Kansas City and met with area mayors and county officials to discuss options for keeping the Chiefs and the Royals in Missouri. Would you agree with using state funds to keep the teams in Missouri? Why or why not? Why not?
I don't see a big enough net benefit just to bend over. I believe Kansas City Chiefs, if they're committed to staying in Kansas City or in Missouri, there is certain tax benefits that we could do, but I don't believe in opening up the border war like we see in Kansas do just to try to keep a team here. We've already seen the economic fallout in St. Louis when the Rams left. We see leveraging from billionaires when it comes to property and evaluations. I would like to see the Chiefs here. I think Governor Parsons is doing a better job than our local administrations by keeping the conversation and the pressure on the Chiefs there. But I believe Jackson County and Kansas City should put more skin in the game if they want to keep the Chiefs in Kansas City, as opposed to the state just opening up the pocketbooks.
Thank you. Patty, state funds for the teams?
Well, it's my understanding, like you said, Governor Parson is in conversation about keeping the Chiefs and Royals here, along with leadership from the legislature. And I certainly want to do anything within my power to keep the Chiefs and Royals here in Kansas City, Missouri. I have not been part of the conversations at this point. There hasn't been an ask from the state level. So I'm really eager to be part of those conversations to see what we can do to keep them here. It's vital to the community. They're great revenue generators. I'm a huge sports fan, so certainly want to keep them here.
Thank you. Duran, state funding for the football and baseball teams?
Well, I mean, I can understand where people have an affinity for the Chiefs and for the Royals. And I understand that they play a major role in the economics for the state. But what else are we going to do? I mean, just focusing, taxpayer dollars on trying to keep the Chiefs and the Royals in the state, it seems to me that we're missing the big boat on a lot of other cultural things that could be economic instruments and supply side products for the state. I mean, if we look at Kansas City in particular, we got 18th and Vine. And unless I've totally missed something in St. Louis, I believe that 18th and Vine is the only Black culture entertainment district that we have in the state. And we continuously see funds, going all over the place to support places and other things. But yet and still, 18th and Vine is still, it's coming along, but it can be a lot much further if it had the type of support and recognition that it deserves. So keeping the Chiefs and keeping the Royals, that's one thing, but I think that we should also focus on the other cultural assets that we could bring to Missouri to make the state great.
Thank you. Barbara Ann, state funding for the Chiefs and the Royals?
One, the governor has not come to us and asked us for that. Two, the governor did not meet with either the Chiefs or the Royals owners, but indeed did meet with local elected officials of the county and the city. I want to, the economic impact or fallout. The Rams left St. Louis and they paid them almost $1 billion to leave them. So St. Louis probably did better with the Rams actually leaving, since St. Louis never came to the games. For us, we're talking about tens of millions of state income tax dollars. In Kansas City alone, tens of millions of dollars from the earning tax, because every single person that comes to Arrowhead or the Royals and plays, whether it's Taylor Swift, Beyonce, or Lionel Messi, will you give us 1% before you leave? It is a great boon to our tourism. Without the Chiefs, there would be no World Cup of 2026, because not every Chiefs owner has a father that founded the MISL. On the flip side, the voters of Jackson County have spoken, and they did not like the proposal as it set forth. So before we as a state entity can decide we're just going to write a check, we need to make sure that the voters of Jackson County are highly benefited with a great collective bargaining agreement. I'm going back to when I worked at the NFL, with a great community benefits agreement. And the last thing I'll say about 18th and Vine is they are getting lots of money. I've given every entity at 18th and Vine money every single year to save it.
Thank you. Time's up. And Pat?
Yes, I believe that we need to do all that we can to keep the Royals and the Chiefs here in Missouri. Chiefs are Missouri's team, and the Royals are Missouri's team. These are fantastic assets to the city of Kansas City, Missouri, Jackson County. And we need to do is to make sure that we are working with our communities and ensuring that those folks that are going to be voting, or if it's a future measure, to figure out how do we do that together that the neighborhoods are engaged and consistently engaged early as we think about community benefits, which are so important as we think about just this current environment, and also how we could be able to rebuild some trust and really talk to the folks that this is going to impact every single day. These are incredible revenue drivers for our state. We cannot afford to let them leave at this point when we think about just the importance of what's to come. The World Cup's going to be here in 2 years. We just need to make sure that we're doing all that we can from the state level to be a regional leader on this. We need to make sure that we are keeping these stadiums here. And even the possibility of downtown baseball, we've seen the economic impact it's had in other cities. And we also could think about the importance of driving additional revenue here with hospitality and tourism so that we can continue to increase our revenue and then provide that as those revenues as resources to address other issues such as affordability and healthcare and access to things that we need that are so important, as well as funding our schools. We know how important it is to fund our schools and to also make sure that we're augmenting those costs for folks that feel like Kansas City is out of reach. But that's one of my pillars, is making sure that Kansas City is affordable for all.
Thank you. This question will go to you, Pat. We'll start with you. Several bills were filed in the Senate this year to eliminate property tax. Would you support this as a senator, and how would you replace that lost revenue for municipalities?
Yeah, I think, when I think about the cities or municipalities and our current environment where we need to continue to offset a lot of these costs of living for folks. And when we think about the affordability issue, it's so important that we make sure that we're working at the state to help with issues of affordability and issues that are impacting our everyday families, such as the Jackson County tax assessments that have been just so devastating for a lot of folks. But when we think about the efficiencies that we could drive when it comes to taxes, I'm a proponent of making sure that we have a government that's serving everyone, that works for the people, and that is making sure that we are also finding unique ways and strategies and tools from the state to help with our local municipalities as they start dealing with other issues such as the mental health crisis, which is a huge issue here in Kansas City. And I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to break ground on a mental health hospital. That's a big issue. But for me, ultimately, it's about finding a middle ground, a way that is going to make taxes work for folks, while we're still also making sure that we're funding the important departments and services that our cities and municipalities provide, and amenities that we need so that we can live prosperous and healthy lives here, so people could want to come here and live, work, and play, but also making sure that we're investing in other areas where we're supporting first responders and we're supporting public safety in all aspects. So holistically, I see this as a great way to continue to as we grow our city, making sure that it's affordable for all, and we're putting resources and putting action where our intent is, so that we can support working families and everyone in Kansas City.
Thank you. Teron, the several bills were filed in the Senate this year to eliminate property tax. Would you support this as a senator, and how would you replace that lost revenue for municipalities?
I would absolutely support the elimination of the property tax. I think one of the things that we're starting to lose sight of is that government doesn't make your life better. I'm sorry, can you still hear me? Government doesn't make your life better. You are able to make your life better. You should be in control of your resources and your funds. The more taxes that you have in any type of environment, that means that you're taking resources out of the community. And once those resources are taken out of the community, the only thing that it does is just grow the government. And then the government starts to decide who the winners and who the losers are. One of the things that we were talking about earlier, as far as local control. Well, the reason why we don't have local control with the police department is because Kansas City's politics has shown itself to be very, very corrupt in certain circumstances. We had a situation with the land bank here in Kansas City where property was being allowed to be sold for $1. That didn't go too well because of the nature of in the structure of that organization, and some underhanded dealings with politicians as well. So when you start to talk about trying to take resources away from people through the form of taxes, then you're not talking about improving those folks' lives, because the government becomes the one that decides the winners and the losers. And if you really start to take a look at the situation, you actually start to see a contraction in your economy. So we should make sure that people have as many resources as they can, and we should also make sure that we don't have a corrupt situation where we have out-of-state folks buying up the property and buying up real estate in our local cities and increasing the
Time, please.
the cost of living here. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Ann, if we eliminate property tax, how would you replace that lost revenue for municipalities? Would you support
Well,
that?
I vote and fought against eliminating property taxes with my fellow senators. In those states where they eliminate property tax, such as Texas or Florida, they hot, they got beaches, they got tourism, they have extremely high sales taxes. I lived in New Jersey as a kid. There were some taxes that were eliminated, but whenever you eliminate one tax, you're gonna come and increase those taxes in another arena. So if we eliminated property taxes for Kansas City School District, Raytown School District, Hickman Mill and Center, which are all in my district, you're gonna eliminate those school districts too. Because property taxes in Missouri are the prime revenue source for public education. I'm a strong advocate of public education. I'm a Kansas City kid. All my sisters and brothers are. My daughter is. My grandchildren are in KCPS now. So I think that if we were to eliminate property taxes, we've got to be open up enough to understand that we're going to pay extra taxes somewhere else. And it'll be more than just a regular user tax. Our sales taxes may increase. It'll be an elimination of people being able to buy property because the cost will be incorporated into that. It's basic economics. You have to have an ability to be able to ebb and flow. And with that, the elimination of property taxes, in order to keep things going the way they do in our state, we're going to have to find another source. So for me personally, I don't approve of any elimination of our property taxes.
Thank you. Brandon, property taxes?
Yeah, this is actually one of the issues that made me start to decide to run for Senate this year. I was at the Capitol and I was walking around and I happened to be up there at the same time my county auditor was there. And what was interesting to me was Republicans, white and black Democrats, they don't have any black Republicans in the Senate at this time, was running up to me asking me if this was a racial issue because this is how it was being presented from Kansas City standpoint. And I got angry because I was like, nah, it's not just a racial issue because our auditor happens to be black. If you look at the district in which taxes jumped 80% to 100%, most of those residents happen to be black. So it can't be targeting a black auditor. I said all of this to go to the standpoint of looking at property taxes and also the metrics of what funds our schools and how we should as a state be willing to change and not be as committed to old forms of taxation that is proven to not produce high quality when we look at public education. As a simple example, when it comes to property taxes and special protections, I believe that there are several ways that we can work as a state, understanding that rural areas and city areas are populated differently, understanding that demographics and social demographic tracks are hard concrete evidence that we can look at and create a metrics of property preservation. So I would actually be encouraged to work with Republicans and Democrats on creating a way of formulating property tax protections.
Thank you.
So yes, I'll support some form.
Thank you. Patty?
I do not support eliminating property tax. It takes away funding from our public schools, services, libraries, fire departments. I had a lot of constituents who did have concerns with the increase in the property tax assessment this year. And I worked with several of my colleagues on issues that we can do to address them. For example, we need to update the circuit breaker for our seniors and disabled community. I did vote in support of the freeze of property tax for our seniors, but a flat elimination of property tax will hurt our community. We just can't do that. It will defund our schools, but hopefully there's something we can come up with next session where we can do something that get creative that wouldn't eliminate funding for our schools and essential services.
Thank you. Patty, we're going to come right back to you with this question. It's kind of a follow-on. What approach would you take towards funding K-12 education?
Well, first of all, the foundation formula is outdated and we need to address that. And we've just been doing the bare minimum of funding our schools. We know that the majority party, Republicans, want to destroy public education. And they're just chipping away time and time again. You know, for the past 2 years, we've fully funded transportation, but that's just the bare minimum. You know, I've been a strong advocate speaking in opposition as the Republicans have attacked public schools. I have supported increase in teacher pay time and time again. And I am pleased to be the only candidate in this race who's been endorsed by our teachers, Missouri NEA, Better Schools for Missouri, and AFT.
Thank you. Barbara Ann, same question. How to fund K-12?
Well, one, we stopped defunding K-12 by giving vouchers that are not trickling down, as Reaganites would say, to low-income persons. Our voucher system, our educational scholarship opportunities have not yet trickled down to those students who already cannot afford to go there. Our foundation formula has been improved in the last 4 years since I've been in the Senate. We have increased teacher pay, but all of that has been to the detriment of actually fully funding what we need to do. My family is from Saline County, Missouri. So the teacher pay increase is great for them, but taking funding away to give to someone in a more wealthy area of the state hurts us. How would we fully fund them? How would we need to put more money from a state perspective in education, not only from K through 12, but we need to put more money in pre-K, we need to put more money in junior colleges, and we need to put more money in our university system. We own 10 institutions in the state. So I think that we work on bettering the formula. There were decades of dormancy on working to increase this formula. We are blessed in the Senate to have a staff member who worked on the original formula before it began to get diluted. And through his efforts, we were able to work this year to bring more funding back.
Thank
And
you.
I would continue to work to do that.
Thank you. Pat?
Yes, we must increase the foundation formula funding for our schools. I am a product also of public schools, and I know that we have very, very severe challenges as it relates to fully funding our schools and ultimately making sure that we're taking care of our future leaders of tomorrow. One of the things that I would love to focus on is increasing teacher pay. These folks are essential workers in my mind, and we have to figure out and do all that we can from a state perspective to help support our teachers, increase teacher pay, since they're there every single day, teaching our young people to become productive citizens and preparing our workforce for tomorrow. One of the things that I bring that's uniquely different in terms of in this race and in this dynamic is, again, this race is about change versus much of the same. I've been able to actually deliver results for folks in our schools and folks that actually live in the district. I helped the Hickman Mills School District pass their bond so they could actually increase teacher pay and also build out and renovate areas that are going to be impactful to our young people and students, so that every student in our district has an environment that empowers them and gets them excited about learning environment and also building relationships and mentoring and being able to be productive young people in our cities. But I've also seen the impact also on our higher education. We got to increase higher education funding. And I worked with Metropolitan Community College to build the first workforce training center on 29th and Troost, and an instrumental component where it again shows to voters that I'm a leader that'll get results done and have a track record and receipts to prove it.
Thank you. Duran? How to fund K-12?
Well, I think one of the things is that this form is nice, but what we should be doing with K through 12 is a little bit more, or it's going to require a little bit more than just 90 seconds to respond. And let me just share a story with you. I was looking for to make a little extra money, so I wanted to pick up a part-time job. I love kids and I love education, so I started to work with the organization called Link. I walk into the school and I see a billboard, and on this billboard it was promoting an agenda that I believe has nothing to do with children. And so one of the reasons why I think that people have become so dissatisfied, with the school system, and they're taking their kids out of the school system, and people are really looking at ways to rehaul the education process in the United States, period, is that we have just gone way too far down a path that is not actually educating our children. And so one of the things that I would like to focus on is I would like to focus on a program or focus on activities that brings education to the kids. And we can do that in all different types of ways. So it's a blessing that we actually passed school choice in this last legislative session. So we can give parents and give people more opportunity to get their kids properly educated as opposed to just being indoctrinated.
Thank you. Brendan, how would you fund K-12 education?
Actually try to bring something back that I was actually able to pass out of the House a few times, but definitely had Democratic opposition. So it's a hybrid between what people would call school choice and public options. It creates signature schools, which allows communities to have control over their educational outlook. I was elected when Dr. Castro got caught with the DESI scheme, and I said all that going to data and trusting outsourced data. I believe communities are smart enough and we have enough technology that we can allow telling in education. What the bill that I had did was it created signature schools again inside of a geographical boundary. So you will have your elementary school, your middle school, and your high school. Creates feeder schools, which strengthens the educational outcome. The curriculum that is dedicated would be math, science, reading, world history, which is different than American history, and everything else would be selective upon that community and that school board. So it somewhat changes state engagement and state regulation and allows school boards to have more control over their academic curriculum in a streamline of feeder schools. The difference that we'll see right now in Kansas City would take away the admission process of, say, a specialized school like Purcell or Lincoln. Now, if kids cannot qualify once they're in their school, they can obviously be flunked out, but it takes away restrictive admissions. So that, again, goes back to that hybrid public model.
Thank you. We're at time. We've come to the time in the forum for your 2-minute closing. So I'll let you gather your thoughts, and I just want to thank you personally for joining us this evening. We're going to do our closing remarks, and we will start with you, Darren.
Well, thank you for inviting me to the forum. I really appreciated participating in the forum. And one of the things that I just hope that everyone gets from this forum is that, we have to start to look at what we can do to actually restore the quality of life for places like Kansas City. The cost of living in Kansas City has just become, outrageous. The crime in Kansas City, we focus a lot on the homicide, but yet and still the property crimes, they're starting to tick up as well. And so I would just like to, again, thank you for the opportunity. And if I am elected, then you will see the initiative of a person who's really dedicated and committed to bringing about a better Kansas City and Missouri. Thank you.
Thank you. Brandon, your 2 minutes for closing remarks.
My experience of the state capitol is a very diverse arena. And I believe that we should have senators that are creative and have a desire to not only understand people's separation or divisiveness, but to engage that divisiveness in a wholehearted attempt to change legislation constructively. And I believe if we have senators that are dedicated to that and not just carrying a partisan flag, we wouldn't have stalemates or the need to have long filibusters that lead to nothing. We should have productive sessions. When I talk to Republicans and I talk to Democrats, everybody wants to do something, but we get caught up in the dogma because we have very few people that are dedicated to actually talking about issues and understanding the differences of why we don't necessarily agree before we even try to agree.
Thank you.
I still got 4 minutes, huh? Never mind.
Yeah, you still have some time. Did you want to?
And the only other thing that I would say is my track record shows that I prove what I say. It doesn't actually matter to me one's social economic standing. It matters to me if 1 and 1 is 2, sometimes 3, never 4. And again, we need senators that have common sense and is willing to work across the aisle and has the history of not only filing legislation, but actually obtaining that in which they file.
Thank you. Patty, your 2-minute closing.
Thank you to the league for organizing this forum. I have ties to every corner of the district. My dad was born and raised in the historic Northeast, and as a kid, I went to church with my grandma there. I was raised in South KC, and as an adult, I've lived in the Plaza Brookside area. My parents instilled in me the value of service, which is why I became a nurse. I spent the majority of my bedside nursing in ICU. In 2016, I got more civically engaged, and as I became more involved, I did not like the direction our state was going. I felt compelled to advocate for Missourians and decided to run for state rep. I'm the only candidate in this race who's been elected, serving in the trenches down in Jefferson City for the past 4 years, working for you. I'm proud to have passed several bills that help working families increase access to healthcare and that will save lives. But make no mistake, I do not hesitate when calling out the Republicans on their hateful agenda. There's more work to be done, and that's why I'm running to be your state senator. I'll hit the ground running on day number 1. At a time when we have to fight for reproductive rights, having a nurse's voice is critical. I'm proud to have been endorsed by firefighters, teachers, nurses, and labor organizations because they know my record of accomplishments and trust me to continue to advocate for them. It's been an honor representing HD 25, and I hope I continue serving the people as your next state senator. To learn more about my website, please visit pattyformo.com, and I hope I can earn your vote on August 6th.
Thank you. Pat?
Yes, thank you, Cheryl, and to the league. Really appreciate, again, the opportunity to share with your listenership and all of your members. Really deeply appreciate the opportunity. I've talked to thousands of voters all across this district, and this election is about change versus much of the same. And a lot of folks just really want a leader who can get things done and who has the results and track record to deliver results for Kansas City. As we've seen with just the lack of, or even just some of the dysfunction in Jefferson City, I'm the only U.S. diplomat in this race. And I think that's so important that I have the training and skill set working in the Foreign Service and deployed overseas in Pakistan and in Mexico, where I've been able to work across the aisle to get things done and deliver results for our country. I'm taking that same mindset and attitude to Jefferson City to get things done for Kansas City, to fight for Kansas City's fair share and more. I bring a very unique resume, working at the Federal Reserve Bank and on financial literacy initiatives for folks that are largely outside of the financial mainstream and helping them understand about the importance of savings accounts and getting into the financial mainstream and banking so they can live successful lives. Again, serving overseas in the Foreign Service at the highest levels of government, where I've been able to take that skill set and I want to take that to Jefferson City to get things done. And then as a builder, I'm a builder. And one of the things that I do is I see visions to life, and I never leave plans unfinished. And for me, it's about executing and getting things done and delivering results for Kansas City. Over the last 7.5 years, I've delivered those results from north, south, east, and west, or throughout this district, delivered almost $1 billion worth of construction value and economic impact, and actually helping people succeed, helping minority and women-owned businesses succeed, helping our school districts have a shot at success and growth. I think that one of the unique components that I bring as well is just a large coalition of support. And having grown up here and having family here and on the West Side and growing up in Northeast and living in the West Side, I have a family that is backing me, that is deeply rooted in public service. And what history could we make as well is electing the first Latino in the state Senate in its 202-year history. I want to work for Kansas City and be a voice for all of Kansas City. I ask for your vote. Please visit my website, patcontreras.com, and looking forward to seeing you at the polls on August 6th.
Thank you. Barbara Ann, your 2-minute closing.
I live by the scripture, Luke 12:48. To whom much is given, much is required. I entered the halls of the Capitol in January of 2018 to do just that, to protect the elderly, to protect the children, and to protect those most vulnerable. I am the only Democrat that has passed a bill every single year that aims to complete those goals. I believe in results, not rhetoric. That's why when I walked in the doors, 17-year-olds were still charged as adults. They no longer are. 12-year-olds could still be considered adults with a hearing in crimes. They no longer are. Our young people were jailed with adults. They no longer are. I did it. Kevin Strickland is free today because of the legislation that I crafted and that I filed. And because of that, anybody in this state who has been found guilty and who is truly innocent has an opportunity to be heard again. I believe in economic development throughout the 9th District and of course through our rural communities, because in my heart, I'm still a country girl from Blacksburg, Missouri. As a result of that, I bring back money, more money than the state Kansas City has ever seen for workforce development, small business development, youth funding, and arts and humanities. Because if we don't take care of our kids, we can't take care of our future. I believe that fighting for criminal justice has to be fairly applied. It is why I returned home for law school to help those who are less fortunate and don't necessarily want a public defender and can't afford another one. And I work with the criminal justice forums. I believe in solving problems. I've given money to food insecurity, domestic violence, public education, the homeless for our children, and I have brought back $300 million for a brand new mental health facility. I am effective, engaged, and experienced, and the only one that can do the right thing for Jackson County. I'm a strong voice for the last 7 years and the only strong voice to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Time. Well, thank you all. Now we'll turn the forum back over to Anitra.
Thank you, audience, for your interest in the August 6th election. A recording of this forum will be available on the League's website, lwvkc.org. A complete list of our future forums, and we have 4 more to go, is also available on our website. Please take a moment to share our forums via your Facebook, Nextdoor, and other social media channels. And remember, for voting and candidate information, visit lwvkc.org and vote411.org. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.